My name is Claire Reynolds, and on the morning of my 15th wedding anniversary, I thought I was boarding a plane to Paris with the man I'd built my life around. Instead, standing at Gate 14 of O'Hare International Airport, suitcase in hand, I heard words so absurd, so cruel, that they might as well have been scripted by some sadistic playwright. Actually, Connor said, grinning like he was sharing the punchline of a joke, only he understood my secret girlfriend is coming. You're not. Time slowed. The words seemed to echo, bouncing off the glossy terminal floors and into my ears again and again, as if repetition might make them less real. His father Jack leaned back against his rolling Samsonite with an approving chuckle, shooting his son a thumbs up. A thumbs up. Like betraying your wife at the gate of her dream anniversary trip was some kind of locker room prank. I remember the sting of the fluorescent lights overhead, the smell of burnt Starbucks espresso drifting from the kiosk behind us, and the way my carefully ironed blue dress suddenly felt like a costume. I had worn it because Connor once told me years ago that it made my eyes look like sapphires. That was before the smirk, before the late nights, before the silence. I clutched my boarding pass, the ink smudging slightly under my damp fingers. What? What do you mean? My voice cracked so small I barely recognized it. Connor didn't flinch. He adjusted the strap of his leather carry-on and repeated himself slower this time, like I was a child. Tessa is coming with me. You're not. The syllables landed like bricks. Tessa. I knew the name. The paralegal he'd once called ambitious. I remembered her long blonde hair, her careless laugh at the firm's holiday party. And now, she was my replacement. You can't be serious, I whispered, looking between Connor and Jack, praying for some sign that this was a mistake, a tasteless prank gone too far. Jack just smirked, his eyes scanning me the way a man might look at a misplaced object cluttering the room. Lighten up, Claire, you'll survive. My boy deserves a real partner, someone who keeps up with him. My stomach churned. The gate agent's voice droned over the intercom, announcing boarding for Group 1. Our group. The dream vacation I had spent years planning was boarding without me. I felt rooted to the terminal floor, like my shoes had been cemented there. Families bustled past, children tugging at parents' sleeves, honeymooners snapping selfies under the glowing departures sign. The world moved forward, and I stood there gutted. Connor didn't even meet my eyes. Look, Claire, don't make this a scene. It's already decided. Already decided. Like I was nothing more than a reservation he could cancel without penalty. My throat burned with unshed tears, but even through the fog of humiliation, one thought pushed its way through. They have no idea what's waiting for them. Because what Connor, his smug father, and his shiny new girlfriend didn't know was that their first-class trip to Paris had quietly been rerouted days ago. Every confirmation email, every upgrade, every itinerary they thought was taking them to the City of Light had been swapped with surgical precision. Instead of sipping champagne under the Eiffel Tower, they were headed for Detroit, Michigan, more specifically, a week-long bedbug awareness conference at a dingy roadside motel complete with coin-operated showers and fluorescent-lit banquet halls. But standing there, I didn't let the satisfaction show. I let my hands tremble, let the tears sting, let Connor believe he'd won. Because the best revenge isn't loud, it's quiet. Methodical. Waiting like a wolf in tall grass. The gate agent called final boarding for first-class passengers to Paris. Connor placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, and the two of them walked away without so much as a backward glance. I stood alone at Gate 14, suitcase by my side, the echo of betrayal still hanging in the sterile air. My heart cracked open in that moment, but so did something else. Resolve. Because if betrayal is a fire, then revenge is the steel forged in its heat. And I was done being the woman who begged for scraps of love. When people ask how long a marriage takes to unravel, they expect a neat answer. One affair, one fight, one unforgivable betrayal. But in my case, it was more like water dripping on stone. Tiny cuts, 1,000 dismissals, By the time Connor announced at the airport that he was replacing me with his paralegal, the wound was already wide open. We'd been married 15 years together for nearly 20. I met him my junior year of college. He was ambitious even then, always talking about trajectory, like life was a stock chart, and he was destined for Wall Street or Washington. I was drawn in by that energy. When you're 20, ambition looks a lot like confidence. You don't yet see how it can curdle into arrogance. The first few years were good, or maybe I just remember them that way. Our honeymoon in the Smoky Mountains was simple but full of laughter. Connor wasn't rich then, not yet, but he had that glimmer in his eye, that restless hunger. I thought we were a team. I worked as a marketing assistant, saving what little we could, clipping coupons while he slogged through law school. I believed in us and him. I can't pinpoint when things shifted. Maybe it was after his first big case win, or when his father started calling me housewife material in that tone that wasn't quite a compliment. Jack had always been larger than life, the kind of man who thought his approval was currency. He didn't give it to me freely. To him, I was never quite enough. Connor needs someone who can keep up, he told me once at Thanksgiving, swirling bourbon in a crystal glass, like he was narrating a documentary. The turkey had been dry that year, my first time hosting, and Jack never let me forget it. He didn't yell, didn't need to. Just a pursed lip, a raised brow, a comment sharpened enough to slice skin. I worked harder after that. At my job at home, at being the perfect wife. I ironed Connor's shirts even when I was dead tired. I learned how to cook his mother's recipes even though half of them made me gag. I smiled through dinner parties where partners' wives compared jewelry and vacations, while I clutched my glass of supermarket Cabernet and tried not to feel small. Some nights I'd crawl into bed after midnight exhausted from a 12-hour shift and an extra freelance project only to find Connor already asleep, turned toward the wall. He smelled faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. I told myself it was nothing. Stress, ambition, late nights at the firm. He's working for us, I thought. For our future. But our future kept getting further away. Every year I tried to plan something special for our anniversary, a road trip, a weekend getaway, and every year Connor brushed it off. Next year, Claire, he'd say when the promotion comes through, or work's too crazy right now. So I stopped asking. I started saving. Quietly, secretly, I funneled a little from each paycheck into an account he didn't know about. Not to hide it, but because I wanted to surprise him, to show him that after all the dry turkeys, the long nights, the loneliness, I still believed in us. Paris, the city of light. I had dreamed of it since I was a girl flipping through glossy magazines at the library. I pictured us strolling along the Seine, sipping coffee at a cafe, where Hemingway once wrote, kissing under the twinkle of the Eiffel Tower. I thought if anything could rekindle what we'd lost, it would be Paris. 18 months I saved. Every freelance gig, every tax refund, every bonus check went into that account. I cut corners, no lattes, no new clothes, no weekend brunches with friends. My coworkers teased me for being frugal, but I smiled. They didn't know I was building something bigger. When the travel agent slid the brochure across her polished desk, she raised one eyebrow at my worn cardigan. "This is our premium package," she said, her voice dripping with doubt. "Glass floor bungalows, private tours, champagne tastings." I pushed my credit card across the table. "Book it." Her expression softened just a little. "That's quite an investment." "It's worth it," I said. And I believed it. I wanted to see Connor's face light up again, to hear him laugh, without the edge of irritation, to remember the man I married. But deep down I think I also wanted something else. Proof. Proof that all my sacrifices meant something. That I wasn't just background noise in his life. Of course the signs were already there. The late nights. The way he stopped reaching for me in bed. The new password on his phone. The hair-long blonde that I pulled from his jacket one afternoon, holding it up to the light like a clue in a detective novel. It wasn't mine. My highlights had grown out months ago. Working with the new paralegal, Connor said, not even glancing up from his laptop. "She's ambitious. Reminds me of myself." He said it like it was praise, like ambition excused everything. I nodded, swallowing the question burning on my tongue. Instead, I went back to researching Paris itineraries. And that's how marriages end. Not with a single blow, but with 1,000 tiny cuts, each one small enough to ignore, until you wake up one morning at gate 14, suitcase in hand, and realize you've been replaced. Still, even in that moment of devastation, I wasn't helpless. Because while Connor had been plotting his shiny new life, I had been plotting something else. And Paris was never really the destination. To understand why Connor's betrayal cut so deeply, you have to understand his family, particularly his father, Jack. If Connor was the flame that drew me in, Jack was the shadow looming behind it, shaping the way my husband saw the world. From the very beginning, Jack made it clear I was an outsider. At our engagement dinner, he raised his glass of scotch and offered a toast to Connor carrying on the Stewart legacy. And to Claire, well, she'll keep the home fires burning. Everyone laughed, but the words stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I'd graduated college with honors, landed a solid job in marketing, and already supported us while Connor was still buried in case law. But to Jack, I was just a placeholder. A woman to iron shirts and host dinner parties while his son climbed the ladder. He had a way of making insults sound like observations. When I cooked for the first Thanksgiving at our house, Jack carved the turkey, tasted a bite, and said with a sigh, "A touch dry but admirable effort." His words were smooth, but his eyes flicked to Connor with an unspoken message: "You could have done better." Christmas was no different. I decorated with twinkling lights and red ribbons, proud of how cozy our little house looked. Jack walked in, scanned the room, and said, "Charming." Almost like a student rental dressed up for the holidays. Then he poured himself eggnog as though he hadn't just gutted me in front of everyone. Connor never defended me. At best, he'd shrug as if to say, "That's just Dad." At worst, he'd laugh along, adding a jab of his own. "Don't take it personally, Claire. He's hard on everyone." But I watched how Jack praised Connor's colleagues, his golf buddies, even strangers at dinner parties. His cruelty wasn't indiscriminate. It was targeted. Over the years, I learned that Jack saw life as a ladder, and women weren't supposed to climb. They were accessories, proof of status, polished surfaces to reflect male ambition. When I earned a small promotion at the agency, Jack barely blinked. "Well, it's not exactly corporate leadership, but it's nice you're trying." I laughed it off in front of him, but later in the car I asked Connor why he let his father belittle me. "Because he's right," Connor said casually, adjusting the rearview mirror. "You're not ambitious the way I am. And that's fine. You're steady. Reliable. I need that." The words stung more than he realized. Reliable. Steady. As if I were a household appliance, not a partner. Jack's approval meant everything to Connor. I saw it in the way his shoulders squared whenever his father complimented him, the way his voice pitched upward with pride. If Jack was impressed, Connor felt invincible. If Jack was critical, Connor sulked for days. Their bond was a closed circuit, a current I could never tap into. That dependence bled into our marriage. If I suggested a vacation, Connor deferred to his father's schedule. If I wanted to buy new furniture, he'd ask, "What would Dad think?" At first, I thought it was loyalty. Later, I realized it was obedience. I still remember one 4th of July barbecue. Jack stood by the grill, beer in hand, telling a story about a colleague's wife who'd gone back to school at 40. "Ridiculous," he said, shaking his head. "Wasting tuition on someone who's past her prime. My God, by that age she should be preparing for grandchildren, not midterms." The men around him laughed. I set down my plate of potato salad, cheeks burning. Connor caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head, warning me not to speak. And I didn't. I swallowed my anger along with every other sharp retort, because that's what I did back then. For years, I convinced myself Jack's approval didn't matter, but deep down, I knew it did. Because as long as he dismissed me, Connor would too. And maybe that was the cruelest part, realizing my husband's loyalty to me had always been conditional. Conditional on how well I fit into Jack's vision. Conditional on how well I polished Connor's image. By the time we reached our 15th anniversary, I had endured more subtle humiliations than I could count. I'd been compared, corrected, dismissed, and overlooked. Each comment chipped away at me like a sculptor carving stone, except what remained wasn't art. It was absence. So when Connor stood at the airport gate announcing he was replacing me with Tessa, I wasn't just losing my husband. I was watching the culmination of Jack's influence. Because of course Jack approved. Of course he gave a thumbs up, like it was all part of the grand Stewart plan. And that's why the revenge mattered. Not just for Connor, not just for Tessa, but for Jack. For every smirk, every pursed lip, every subtle jab over 15 years. What they didn't know was that my silence all those years hadn't been weakness. It had been patience. And patience, when sharpened, is deadlier than any outburst. If my marriage was built on sacrifice, then the Paris trip was supposed to be the reward. My grand gesture. My proof that 15 years of loyalty and patience had meant something. I had dreamed about it for so long that even now, even after everything, the details still live in my head, like ghosts. It started with a secret account. Nothing shady, just a quiet corner of my finances where I funneled leftovers from freelance projects, tax returns, and the odd bonus at work. Connor never cared much for my paycheck anyway. To him, my salary was nice pocket money, as if my 12-hour days and marketing campaigns were hobbies, not contributions. So he never asked where the extra went, and I never told him. By the 5th year of our marriage, I'd started saving. By the 10th, I'd earmarked Paris. It wasn't random. Paris had always been my city of dreams. I'd traced its streets in guidebooks, lingered over photos of Montmartre cafes and the Seine at sunset. To me, Paris was more than a place. It was a promise. A promise that life could be romantic again, that Connor and I could find our way back. The travel agent had looked skeptical when I first walked in, clutching my folder of printouts and handwritten notes. Her office was sleek, polished wood and glass, a world away from my frugal life. She tapped at her computer, raising one eyebrow as if my cardigan and sensible shoes couldn't possibly match the words coming out of my mouth. "You're asking about our premium anniversary package," she said. "That's first-class flights, 5-star accommodations, private excursions. It's an investment." "I know," I replied, sliding my credit card across her desk with hands that trembled only slightly. "Book it." She hesitated, then smiled politely. "Paris in spring. It's magical." Magical. That's what I wanted. I pictured Connor's face lighting up when he realized what I'd planned. I imagined him softening, pulling me close the way he used to. Maybe even saying thank you with real gratitude. I wanted that moment so badly it hurt. For months I built the trip like a cathedral. Every piece was deliberate. The boutique hotel near the Marais with wrought iron balconies, the candlelit dinner on a bateau mouche gliding along the Seine, the tickets to a hidden jazz club in Saint-Germain, even a photography session at sunrise near the Louvre so we could capture memories to hang on our walls, proof that our love had endured. I thought about the little details too. Packing his favorite cologne, choosing the blue sundress he once said made me look like summer. I even practiced a few phrases of French in the evenings, whispering bonjour and merci into the quiet house, while Connor stayed late at the office. Every time exhaustion threatened to swallow me, I pictured Paris. It became my lifeline. And yet beneath the hope, a current of doubt ran like an underground stream. Connor had been pulling away for years, late-night secretive texts, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. I'd ignored the signs, told myself we were just in a rough patch. Paris would fix it. Paris had to. Still, I wasn't naive enough to bet everything on magic. I'd seen too much of Jack's smirk, felt too many of Connor's dismissals. Something in me had shifted, a quiet survival instinct whispering that if the dream collapsed, I needed a plan. So while I booked champagne tastings, I also researched cancellation policies. While I reserved a suite overlooking the Eiffel Tower, I also learned how easy it was to change an itinerary with the right passwords and a little creativity. That duality became my secret rhythm: hope and preparation, love and caution, Paris and the alternative. When the tickets finally arrived in the mail, I sat at the kitchen table and traced our names on the glossy envelopes with my fingertip. Mr. and Mrs. Connor Stewart. The title looked official, final, like something carved into marble. I tucked them into my desk drawer alongside the receipts and confirmation emails and locked it all away like treasure. For weeks leading up to the trip, I allowed myself to believe. I cooked his favorite meals, arranged strawberries on Belgian waffles the morning of our departure, even polished the good silverware, a wedding gift from Jack, given with the words, "For special occasions. Don't waste it on weeknights." This was my special occasion, my chance to prove that all the little cuts, all the sacrifices hadn't been in vain. But the truth, the one I can admit now, is that I wasn't just trying to rekindle love. I was trying to prove my worth. To Connor, to Jack, to myself. That's what makes the memory so cruel, because while I stood at gate 14 with my suitcase packed full of hope, Connor was already miles ahead playing a different game. And Jack. He was the referee, nodding his approval as I was benched. Yet even as betrayal scorched me that morning, I had one small flame left, not of love, not of hope, but of cunning. Because Paris was never really the gift. The real gift, the one they hadn't unwrapped yet, was waiting for them in Detroit. By the time we reached the airport, I was already on edge. Something about the way Connor carried himself that morning set my nerves buzzing. He was too casual, too smug, like a man walking into a surprise party he'd planned for himself. I tried to ignore it. I focused on the breakfast I'd cooked before dawn, his favorite eggs, Benedict with smoked salmon, fresh dill sprinkled just right. He hadn't touched the plate. Said he wasn't hungry. I told myself it was nerves, excitement. But the truth was simpler. He had no appetite for me anymore. At security, he breezed through, phone in hand, barely acknowledging me. Jack walked beside him, cracking jokes with the TSA agent, his booming laugh echoing through the line. I trailed behind, clutching my boarding pass like it was a lifeline. Gate 14 was already crowded. The departures board glowed with Paris, on time. I felt a swell of relief. After 18 months of saving, planning, hoping, it was finally happening. And then Connor turned to me with that half smirk, the one I used to find charming before it hardened into cruelty. "Actually," he said, voice low but firm, "my secret girlfriend is coming. You're not." At first I thought I'd misheard him. The words were so absurd, so brazen, that my brain scrambled to reject them. I blinked, searching his face for a hint of a joke. But he wasn't joking. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my throat dry. Jack chuckled, crossing his arms. "Lighten up, Claire. My boy deserves someone who matches his ambitions. Don't take it so personally." The ground seemed to tilt under me. People bustled past, families juggling strollers, couples clutching passports, while my world caved in. Connor's eyes flicked to the boarding gate. "Don't make a scene. It's already decided." Already decided. As though I were an afterthought, a cancelled reservation, a detail he'd forgotten to update. I wanted to scream, to claw at him, to demand an explanation. But all I could do was stand there, clutching my suitcase until my knuckles went white. Images flashed in my mind, the folder of itineraries, the brochure I'd tucked into my desk, the blue sundress I'd chosen for our first night in Paris. All of it crumbling in the face of his casual dismissal. And yet, beneath the heartbreak, something else stirred, a cold, sharp satisfaction. Because what Connor and Jack didn't know, what Tessa certainly didn't know, was that I had already rewritten the ending to this story. I'd found the emails weeks ago. Late at night, after Connor had fallen asleep on the couch phone slipping from his hand, I saw the messages pop up. Tessa's name glowing on the screen. Her words dripping with flattery, her plans aligning with his. I should have confronted him then. I should have walked away. But instead, I planned. If he wanted Tessa, he could have her. But he'd get her not in Paris, not under the sparkling lights of the Eiffel Tower, but in Detroit. At a week-long bedbug awareness conference where their first-class honeymoon suite was a motel room with coin-operated showers and stained carpets. I'd rerouted everything: flights, hotel confirmations, even the itinerary emails he skimmed without reading. He'd signed the revised paperwork himself, too arrogant to notice the details. So I stood at gate 14 and let the tears pool, let Connor believe he'd broken me. Jack gave him that fatherly clap on the shoulder like betrayal was just another Stewart family milestone. They walked away, boarding passes in hand, smug as kings. I stayed behind, my chest hollow but my spine straightening. They thought they'd humiliated me. They thought I'd slink home defeated, licking my wounds. But revenge doesn't require an audience. It requires patience, precision, and a willingness to let your enemies walk straight into the trap you've set. As Connor disappeared down the jet bridge, his father trailing behind, I whispered under my breath, "Bon voyage." The intercom crackled overhead, announcing final boarding for Flight 2463, destination Paris, or so they thought. I turned away, wheeling my suitcase slowly, already savoring the thought of what awaited them. Because heartbreak had sharpened into something far stronger. Resolve. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. The beauty of revenge is in the preparation. People imagine it as a sudden strike, a flash of anger, but the truth is quieter. Revenge is patience dressed in silk, waiting in the corner while everyone else underestimates you. I began planning mine the night I found the emails. Connor had fallen asleep on the couch, laptop open, a glass of scotch sweating on the coffee table. I went to shut it, thinking nothing of it until I saw Tessa's name blinking in the corner of the screen. Her words were shameless. "I can't wait to stroll the Champs-Élysées with you. Your wife doesn't deserve this kind of romance." I do. Something inside me went cold, like a switch flipping. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I copied the itinerary folder from my drawer and sat at my own laptop. While Connor snored, I began rewriting the script. It wasn't difficult, not with my background. Before marriage reduced me to Jack's idea of housewife material, I'd spent years as a project manager for an event company. My specialty: crisis management and rerouting high-profile clients when plans went wrong. If I could redirect a board of 50 executives from the Bahamas to Alaska in under 12 hours because of a hurricane, rerouting my husband's vacation was child's play. Paris was beautiful, yes, but Detroit was perfect. A little research, and I found it: the annual Bedbug Awareness Conference hosted in a drab convention center off the interstate. I almost laughed out loud. Could anything be more poetic? The brochures showed earnest exterminators seminars titled "Eradication Through Innovation" and glossy photos of magnified pests. The hotel, if you could call it that, was a roadside motel with reviews that mentioned coin-operated showers, flickering neon lights, and an authentic Midwestern breakfast of instant oatmeal and lukewarm coffee. I worked methodically. First, I called the travel agent using my most professional voice. "This is Claire Reynolds handling arrangements for the Stewart party. We'll need to implement our contingency plan." I spoke in acronyms and brisk tones, the language of someone who knew what she was doing. She didn't question it. She simply opened the file and followed my instructions. Then came the paperwork. Connor had always signed whatever I put in front of him: permission slips, refinancing forms, even our joint tax returns. He skimmed, scribbled his name, and went back to whatever important thing demanded his attention. So when I slid the revised itinerary across the counter one evening, saying, "Just need your signature to confirm the upgrades," he didn't even glance. His name now bound him to Detroit, non-refundable, non-transferable. The final flourish was email. I crafted fake confirmations from a luxury Paris resort explaining an exclusive reroute due to unforeseen circumstances. Connor barely skimmed them. Why would he? In his mind, I was the planner, the fixer, the background character ensuring his world ran smoothly. I let him believe that. It was my greatest weapon. The morning of our departure, I played my part flawlessly. I set the table with Jack's gifted silverware, cooked Connor's favorite breakfast, even slipped into the blue sundress I'd saved. When he announced Tessa was coming instead, I bit my tongue until it bled. Let him think he'd won. But as they walked away, boarding passes in hand, I knew what awaited them. Day 1, a keynote presentation on bedbug infestation trends in North America. Complimentary magnifying glasses provided. Day 2, a workshop titled Pesticides Friend or Foe, held in a windowless ballroom with flickering fluorescent lights. Day 3, a tour of a local pest control lab complete with close-up demonstrations. Evenings returned to a motel with coin-operated showers, peeling wallpaper, and suspicious stains on the carpet. Meanwhile, I gave myself permission to live. Instead of slinking home, I booked a spa day. I let lavender oil sink into my skin, let strangers knead the tension from my back, and sipped cucumber water while my husband and his mistress learned about pesticide application rates. Their first text came on the second day. Connor's number lit up my phone. "Claire, what the hell is this? Where are we?" I didn't answer. I let him stew. By the third day, Jack left a voicemail, his voice tight with fury. "This childish stunt has gone far enough. Connor's father had connections in the State Department, and I assure you there will be consequences." I laughed until my stomach hurt. Jack's bluster couldn't reroute them from a non-refundable motel in Detroit. The final cherry on top came a week later. I opened my laptop, sipped my coffee, and found their public reviews. Worst anniversary trip ever. Connor had written on a travel site. Motel smelled like chemicals. Conference was a nightmare. Who, in their right mind, wants to spend 7 days staring at enlarged photos of bedbugs? Jack's was shorter but sharper false advertising. My son and his guests deserved better. Coin showers, unacceptable. And Tessa, hers was the best. A 1-star Yelp review of the motel. There were literally bedbug posters on every wall. Not romantic. 0 stars if I could. I clicked away smiling. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one holding the pen, writing my own story. They thought they'd left me behind. Instead, I'd sent them exactly where they belonged. Not Paris, not luxury, not magic. Detroit, with bedbugs. The funny thing about revenge is how quickly it stops being about the other person. At first, I couldn't wait to picture Connor's face when he realized Paris had morphed into a pest control seminar in Detroit. I wanted to hear the panic in Jack's voice, the disgust in Tessa's whine. And yes, I got those moments, texts, voicemails, even their bitter online reviews. But the real satisfaction came later in the quiet. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't bracing for Jack's cutting remarks or Connor's distracted dismissals. The silence in my house wasn't emptiness, it was peace. I started with small acts of reclamation. Clearing out the closet full of clothes I'd bought because Connor liked them. Pencil skirts, neutral blouses, shoes that pinched my toes. Out they went, replaced with soft sweaters and bold colors I hadn't dared wear in years. I cooked meals the way I liked them, heavy on cilantro, spicy enough to make my eyes water, and savored every bite. I slept diagonally across the bed, spreading out like a queen, instead of curling up on my side. A week after their Detroit adventure, I got a manila envelope from a courier, divorce papers. No note, no apology, just the legal severing of what had already died long before the airport gate. I signed them without hesitation, sliding the pen across the paper with a calm hand. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat on the porch listening to the crickets. For once, I didn't replay arguments in my head. I didn't imagine ways I could have been better, more ambitious, more polished. I just breathed. And in that stillness, I realized something important. The revenge had been delicious, yes, but it wasn't the main course. It was the appetizer, the spark that lit the fire. The true feast was freedom. Freedom from Jack's smirk. Freedom from Connor's half-love. Freedom from the weight of trying to be enough for people who would never see me. I began sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. Designs for clothes that made me feel alive. Structured jackets with unexpected twists, flowing dresses in daring colors. I shared a photo with my sister and she immediately texted back, "You've still got it. Make more." I also said yes to Miguel, an old colleague who'd once offered me a position at his growing company. The kind of job that required travel independence and the kind of ambition Jack mocked me for. Within a month, I was packing for a new life, one that didn't orbit around Connor's trajectory. Meanwhile, I kept half an eye on their misery from afar. Screenshots of Tessa's complaints on Instagram, vacation from hell, stuck in Detroit, never again. A voicemail from Jack that I deleted halfway through, his voice rising with impotent rage. I didn't need to respond. Their suffering was complete without my commentary. And yet the sweetest moment came, not from their pain, but from my release. One morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't see the tired wife who'd been replaced at gate 14. I saw a woman who'd walked through fire carrying her own ashes and built something new. I know there are people who'd call what I did petty, cruel even. Maybe they're right. But let me ask you this. How many years of being diminished does it take before you're allowed to draw a line? Before you get to say enough? Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about balance, about letting the scales finally tip in your favor after years of carrying the weight for everyone else. Connor, Jack, and Tessa will always remember their week in Detroit, the stale coffee, the itchy sheets, the humiliation of being scammed by their own arrogance. But me, I'll always remember the moment I chose myself. And if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or replaced, I hope you remember this too. Your worth was never theirs to define. So share your story. Reclaim your power. And if mine resonated with you, stay connected. Because somewhere out there, another woman is standing at her own gate 14 suitcase in hand, not realizing yet that she holds the power to rewrite the ending. The revenge may be sweet, but the real gift is freedom.